Hey there, it's Dr. Karen. And today I'm talking about syntax skills, specifically the question of what syntax skills are age appropriate, particularly within the school age years. So I do get a lot of questions about what skills are age appropriate and how to work through a hierarchy with things like vocabulary, syntax, and language in general. And so the bad news is that there really isn't a perfect hierarchy that you can follow that's going to tell you exactly do this skill, then do this skill, then do this skill. That's not really how language works, especially in the school age years. With a lot of these skills, there isn't this nice, neat linear progression, and there aren't really very clearly outlined developmental milestones. Now, it is a little bit more clear what developmental milestones look like within the 0 to 6 age range. We do know a little bit more about the typical developmental progression, 0 to 6. But after the school age years, things get so variable because language growth is so dependent on exposure and environment, especially with things like vocabulary. And that's why it's really hard to say what skills are age appropriate from a vocabulary standpoint. And so that gets really difficult. The other issue is that sometimes trying to get kids to be age appropriate isn't the best, most functional goal. We really just want them to be able to do the skills that they need to do in order to be successful. So that's a whole other conversation. But today I wanted to talk about syntax specifically because regardless of really anything, we need to know what skills kids need in order to be successful. So we need to think about what language skills are going to support kids' academic growth and the language skills that are going to support high-level comprehension, because those are going to be things that are going to make it easier for them to comprehend what they're reading, comprehend the big picture, and really support that high-level comprehension so that they can think big picture. So one of the things that is a common culprit behind comprehension issues is syntax. And a lot of people don't realize this. A lot of times people are working on inferencing questions and WH questions and problem solving, and all those things are really important to be able to do. But it's very hard to inference when you're having a hard time processing one sentence at a time. And if you don't have a solid understanding of how sentences are put together and you're having a hard time understanding one sentence at a time, of course, you're not going to get the big picture when there's a lot of sentences. So we do need to look at syntax when we have kids that are really struggling with those processing skills. Now, when we think about what's age appropriate, again, it's kind of hard to do that. But one skill that does have more of a linear progression compared to other language skills is the development of complex sentences and the use of subordination. So basically, this is just when you are using a subordinate conjunction to put a sentence together to form a complex sentence. One of the very common ones that kids with language delays struggle with is would be the conjunction because. A lot of times kids have a hard time answering why questions because they aren't necessarily sure how to use subordination, and because is a very common one. You have to say something like, we went to bed early because we were tired. If you're not really sure how to use that word and use that word in a way that allows you to join clauses together, it's going to be really hard for you to speak in longer sentences, to process when other people are using those sentences. They're not going to make sense to you. And it's going to be hard for you to answer those direct questions that require you to use that language form. So this is one thing that's really important. And when we see that developmental progression of how complex sentences are used, a lot of times if kids are using complex sentences, then we're seeing that they have better comprehension and it's going to impact their writing skills as well. And so this is one thing that has been shown to have more of a progression of where it's, gets better and better as we go. And if kids have this skill, then they tend to have stronger language skills in other areas as well. So this is one area where it's really beneficial for you to focus on it because number one, it's kind of an indicator of where their other language skills are, and it can have an impact on those other language skills, and it can have an impact on the complexity of their writing and their ability to comprehend what they're reading. So It's very important. And so a lot of times when people ask me, what syntax skills should kids have at this age? And, how do I know what the hierarchy is of when I should work on this skill and that skill? Really, we should just focus on getting our kids to use more complex sentences. If we just really focus on this skill, then we can embed work on other skills as they come up. But this one is going to be a heavy hitter that's going to make a bigger impact. So really focusing on this is probably more important than trying to find some perfect sequence and developmental progression. It's going to be a lot more functional and useful for our students. So this is actually one of the skills that I show you how to address in my Language Therapy Advanced Foundations course for SLPs. In Language Therapy Advanced Foundations, I teach you how to use a 5-component framework for building the language skills that kids need to support strong reading comprehension and writing and academic skills that are going to support life skills as well. So I use a 5-component framework that addresses things like semantics, morphology, phonology, orthography, and of course, what we're talking about today, syntax. And I dive into each one of those components and show you a set of evidence-based strategies that you can cycle through to make sure that your students have the language skills that they need to succeed in school. So to get more information about that program, you can go to drkarenspeech.com/language therapy, and you'll be able to read through all of the program details. Again, that's drkarenspeech.com/language therapy. And I can also post a link to that